We got the dragon voice going. Can you hear okay like with this one? Is that loud enough? Yeah, good. Right. Right. All right. Good evening, everyone. Here we are back in the saddle. Mahamudra 2. This one? Is that loud enough? With Kalu Rinpoche. So we're again in Profound Buddhism by Kalu Rinpoche, and we're on page 165. So last time we did Mahamudra 1, which is the introduction to Mahamudra. And tonight, begin at least Mahamudra 2. And again, this is our rapid fire, Kalu Rinpoche's rapid fire survey of profound Buddhism. Truly, I think it would be the teaching of Jigten Sumgön that all Buddhism is profound. But nonetheless, they have to put a title on these books to distinguish one thing or another. Can you? How's that? Better? You can. Okay, good. My 1 year is not working. Oh. Yeah, I get clogged ears from time to time. Happily, I haven't had any, hearing loss that I know of. Gretchen might disagree. Yeah. That's right. My hearing loss is not really organic. It's she's not laughing. I'm gonna blame Steffi. Steffi got me in trouble. Except I can blame Dave, and everyone will believe it. Your personal opinion, right? Okay, Mahamudra 2, page 165. Today we must talk about Mahamudra. Mahamudra implies the absence of an object to which meditation is directed. So think of that. It's very clarifying. Because of this absence of an object, this type of meditation can be considered very easy or very difficult. And so that will explain a lot of the commentary that you see, or even like sort of, brief clips from, great masters, because it can be very confusing. Yeah, it's very easy, but very difficult. Why is that? And also it starts to give you a feeling for the Tantra, because there is an object of meditation in the Tantra. But of course, it's this wispy, visualized form of the Buddha, and then also not conceptual, but at least the feeling of, this vast loving kindness and compassion, which, is really slippery, and it's not as concrete, so to speak, as meditating on a concept or your breath, or counting your breath. And I think this is really helpful, because when you see the whole range of the teachings, when we just at least get exposed to the whole range, and this is one reason why lineage is so important, not in some sort of political way, my team's better than your team. Lama Tarchu would often say, I'm not building an army. So it's not like that at all. It's not worldly motivation. But the reason is that these lineages have preserved sort of structures that have worked. So it's something we can rely on. So it's almost like, you choose a Spalding tennis racket as opposed to a Rawlings tennis racket. There are differences, but they're both doing the same thing. But slight little things. And of course, everybody is different. So we all have our individual, things that we like. But of course, at the same time, there's something karmic going on. There's a choicelessness about this. But the power, the helpfulness, the practicality of lineage is just that you get this consistent picture from sort of like beginning to end, from the lowest all the way up to the highest view. And of course, that's very helpful, because wherever you are, and as you have questions going along, each part of it supports another part. I mean, I've noticed sometimes after years of doing like a certain sadhana or something, there'll be some term that just sort of clicks, and you realize you've seen it somewhere else, but you just somehow, it hits you a different way. And so the interdependence, so to speak, and the interlocking nature of these teachings is really something very wonderful. it's like a lineage is like, is like physics or something. I mean, there's calculus in there, there's trigonometry, there's negative numbers, but then you have these very wild and high things going on like quantum physics and everything, but it's all of one piece. And each part supports the other. So it's very, very practical. All right. To approach the Dharma, it is essential to understand the nature of the mind, what is meant by ordinary being and by Buddha, and what are the paths and levels of realization. In particular, without having perceived what is the nature of the mind, it is practically impossible to understand and practice Mahamudra. So it's not really easy. It sounds easy. And from a conceptual point, this is similar to Dzogchen in the sense that there's a certain kind of easy attractiveness. In a funny kind of way, what human beings can do is can be attracted to a teaching that seems like it doesn't take any effort. And in a way, that's true. But on the other hand, we just have so many habits that we've built up and unexamined. That's what ignorance is. It's just not seeing. It's not stupidity. It's just not seeing. It's ignoring something in there. Just to go back to the Tantra for a sec, because we came out of his survey of the Tantra now into the Mahamudra. The Tantra, the visualization practices are two. You have the creation phase, where you visualize yourself as the Buddha and you're working on that, and then various things are happening. But then we have the dissolution phase where it all dissolves. Now, you're resting in the mind of the deity. Well, this is very close to Mahamudra, but it's sort of getting us there in an easier kind of way because our mind has been habituated for eons, believably, into having objects of the mind. And so we have, gross objects in our scientific world. But then with the Tantra, it's not a gross object anymore. It's the creative aspect of the mind. It's just a mind form. So it's very subtle, which means it's easier to dissolve that to the nature of the mind. So again, this is a gradual path, a great graduated path, and that's its power, because wherever you're at, you fit in, and there's a way to work in. And as Jigten Sumgön says, the relative teachings are the absolute teachings. So the whole thing is just profound. Okay, so what is mind? All beings have a mind. How do we comprehend this mind? We conceive it in terms of me, or it is me. Beyond this powerful identification, we do not know what is the nature of the mind. So what does this word mind mean? Mind means that which has the ability to think, to know, to experience, and to feel. Because the mind does not recognize itself, it does not recognize its real nature, and we think, I have a mind. And we conceive mind as a limited object that exists as a thing. We also believe that the world is permanent while it is actually transitory. We believe that it is real while it is illusory, and that it is happiness while it is the support of suffering. We believe the world to be permanent, real, and happy. So these are this permanent, real, and happy. This comes right from classic teachings. The three marks, they're called. Permanent, a real, existent, and then, a blissful. And this is the mistake we make, because actually these are called the viparyasas, I think, in Sanskrit. It means the upside downs. Viparyasa is the verb, I guess, or the adjective that described in ancient India a ox cart turned over upside down. So the progressive approach. The meditation that introduces us to the real nature of mind is traditionally practiced under the supervision of a lama. It is the lama who, first of all, asks the disciple to examine what is this mind. What is called mind, that is, that which thinks and knows, experiences happiness and suffering, is it external to the body, internal, or somewhere between the two? Does mind have form, and what is form? Color, and what color? A volume, and what volume? Questioned by the Lama, the disciple is sent to meditate for several days or even many months. After that, the disciple returns and submits answers based on personal experience to the master. The master will then verify if the discoveries are right. Today, masters have to travel a lot and disciples are distracted by many activities. It has become almost impossible to engage in the process where the Lama poses questions and the disciple takes the necessary time to meditate before returning to reveal his or her answers. We have neither available time nor an opportunity to proceed like this, so I am left to describe what is the true nature of the mind. And this is something, because this is how it was done in Tibet, because you were on extended retreat and you had this ability for the disciple to kind of wrestle, searching, doing this mental search in the answer to these kinds of questions. And the not knowing, is a great kind of stimulus. But it's true, the obligations of these modern lamas and, the lack of training of many of the, new generation of lamas. It's just a horrible thing what happened when they just took over Tibet. All of this kind of thing stopped. So now the traditional 3 retreat, which is more, training of a lama kind of thing, but don't get me wrong, it's profound, but it doesn't have this kind of training usually going on. I mean, for instance, Gar Rinpoche helps his students on 3 retreats so much, but the basic training is done by Rinchen Dorje. And so too, our friend David Curtis, and then also Lama Yeshe Wangmo, did 3 retreat under Kalu Rinpoche. But the retreat master was a Bhutanese monk because, again, the responsibilities and all these lamas, 1, to keep things just going, and then 2, for the spiritual development of the students is enormous. Okay, risks engendered by the master's teaching. This can be a good thing, that the master explains what is the nature of the mind, but it is not without risk. Indeed, there are several possibilities. The disciple can, first, grasp the truth of everything expounded and deeply believe in it. In this case, the explanation perfectly reaches its goal. Without arriving at this understanding, the disciple can also simply think it is without doubt, as the Lama says, and feel confidence. This is again sufficient and poses no danger. But another reaction may occur after the Lama's explanations. Some people may indeed not only doubt the validity, but adopt a position of complete rejection, saying this conception is without foundation, it is completely false. This reaction is very unfortunate, both for the disciple who commits a serious fault, and for the master guilty of the error called divulging teachings which must not be divulged. You have the good fortune to appreciate the Dharma. If what will be explained simply evokes the thought, that is certainly like this because the Lama says it, even if I cannot truly understand it, your attitude will be consistent with the framework of the teaching. All is well. You will not risk the problems engendered by a critical position. And the footnote says, a position of critical rejecting the teaching is damaging in the sense that karmically it engenders blocks that could make someone turn away from the path of liberation in future lives. So this is, risky. In India, the tantric empowerments, the transmissions, were given by, it could be some, really wild kind of yogi. Talopa is such a great example of that. solitary in the jungle, one-on-one, student and teacher. And then when the Tantra went to Tibet, the Tibetans changed because they made the empowerments like a public event. But even there, except for Kalachakra, they were very, very limited. Students had to go through all sorts of preliminary training before. Milarepa and Marpa is an extreme example, but the principles there of the disciple kind of purifying themselves of the grosser kind of obstacles so that they could receive the teachings with a supple mind. But the Tibetans changed it. And, there are risks in that. And one of the risks is that we see it now with the internet. This stuff is all over the internet. It used to be, Gretchen and I, for instance, went to India in 1981. And we had an introduction, which was very fortunate, to the head monk, who was Sri Lankan, at the temple where Buddha came to enlightenment, or on the spot where the Buddha came to enlightenment, next to the spot, the Mahabodhi temple. And he was able to take us to some other places on like a tour, which was really, really wonderful. And one thing we went to, he took us to the spot where the Buddha had, at least where he had practiced austerities. And so we were some distance from Bodh Gaya, and we walked across this huge kind of dry river, and then eventually up these cliffs kind of, and there was a Tibetan temple up there. And this is, again, a spot where the Buddha had practiced, I don't know if all the years of austerities, but some of it anyway there. And, they had, part of the temple was like a chapel, we would call it, to, I believe it was Mahakala. And of course, they wouldn't let us in because that's just how it was. You had to be sort of prepared for this. So it was all very interesting, but this is for the protection of the student, so that the student doesn't inadvertently make some sort of obstacle just based on their not knowing. I often think of it as like, a really proud papa. Now his son is 13 years old. Wow. And he gives him a flamethrower as a gift. You just you don't give that much power until someone's kind of earned it, so to speak. It's not really compassionate at all. Because these teachings use the mind, and especially because they use the energy of our negative emotions, there's just so many protections that are necessary. Protections of what? Well, one, protections of lineage. You can't just make it up. You have to get it from someone. Protections of samaya, these bonds of trust and commitment, not only between the teacher, the lama, and the student, but also to the other students taking empowerment too. Lama Tarchin would often say that, the bond between student and teacher, it's kind of like a rubber band. The teacher will never let it stretch so far that it's going to break. They'll do something, whatever they can do, just ordinary things of just not pushing things or just whatever. But the danger is more amongst the students, because the students, being not enlightened, they can pull the rubber band too far, and it can snap, even though they didn't expect it to snap or didn't want it to snap. So a lot of protections in these things, but nonetheless, divulging teachings which must not be divulged. Okay, let us examine what is the mind. First is emptiness. In the first place, the essence of mind has no form, no color, no volume, and is like an empty space or comparable to the sky. Emptiness is the first characteristic of the mind. And second is clarity. Emptiness, in the sense of space in this room, for example, has no possibility of knowing or feeling unpleasant or pleasant sensations, But the mind can know and feel. The mind has what is called clarity. An example will help us to understand this clarity. In the empty space surrounding us, the sun outdoors, or electricity utilized inside a house illuminates us. Their light allows us to see, know, and distinguish the grounds, flowers, objects in the room, and so forth. Clarity of the mind is what makes this knowledge possible. It is necessary, however, to note the difference between what is really the mind and the preceding example. In the example, an external cause is necessary to produce light, either by the sun or by electrical power. Without their presence, it is dark. Clarity of the mind is independent of any external cause. It belongs to the nature of the mind. If one puts the mind in a state lacking all thought, the mind dwells in a state of empty clarity. Present in emptiness, clarity is also an active force, allowing thoughts to take form, as, for example, an image of India or America appears in the mind when we think of one of those countries. Clarity provides the possibility of knowing, and at the same time is the creative ability of the mind. Now, this is an inner understanding of the Mahayana also. So when we say that it's the Mahayana that results in full Buddhahood, not just self-liberation, I shouldn't say just self-liberation, it's an outstanding accomplishment. But in the inner sense, it's not just a negative or a passive, you might say. It's this fundamental, creativity of the mind, you might say, for lack of a word. But in other words, the clarity is this, it's said that the Shravaka, the hearer, the one who is on the path of self-liberation, can get to a place where they see this self as empty, as not existing unto itself. But outer appearances still appear as if they're real. So this is the difference, because in self-liberation, you can come to that place. But with Buddhahood, it's we say it's like embracing appearances. That's what compassion is. It's not just wisdom. I mean, in the sense of our idea of wisdom as being just sort of a passive understanding or something. But it has this aspect of clarity, that it's not only understanding, but it knows. And so it has this activity, or at least this the vastness. So we have emptiness and clarity. He's talking about the nature of mind. Now, non-obstruction. If the mind were only clarity and emptiness, it would be like the space surrounding us, empty and clear, but without consciousness. To be able to say, this is a pillar, this is a wall, this is a man, and so on, requires a third aspect called intelligent capability, or non-obstruction, which effectively knows everything. Such is the mind. Its essence is emptiness. The nature of this emptiness is clarity, and this clarity emptiness is associated with dynamic knowing. Okay. Neither center nor limit. This is the explanation that I gave you concerning mind. It is now necessary that you meditate and verify it. Establish yourself in a state of not trying to mentally create or produce anything, of not turning outwardly, and of not diving inwardly either. The mind simply dwells in itself. See if the mind is or is not empty, clear, and endowed with the capability of knowing. Understanding what is empty, clear, and a knowing mind is an experience infinitely open and vast. From this experience, it is said that such a mind is without a center and that it has no limit like space. One has to dwell in this state. We should not constrain this emptiness, clarity, knowledge within narrow limits, confining it inside our chest, for example. The mind cannot be located in a defined place. This emptiness, clarity, knowledge is the mode of being of the mind. It is not something manufactured. Let us reside in a state where our mind, on the one hand, pervades to the heights of space, as if it was going further than the moon and sun, with nothing stopping it, and where, on the other hand, it descends more deeply than all the depths of the earth or the ocean. And we stay in this state with no distraction. And with this kind of, non-meditation, you might say, because it has no object. In a sense, it's not, to meditate is what? Well, for starters, it's mindfulness and an object of meditation that one simply brings one's mind to, one's awareness to, again and again and again. And because of mindfulness, which again, the term in Sanskrit and Tibetan has the root for remembering in mindfulness. So that's what we're doing. We're remembering our chosen object of meditation again and again and again. And then the awareness. So mindfulness and awareness. And awareness is awareness. When we realize we've lost our mindfulness, that's awareness. So that's a positive thing, not a negative thing. And we bring our mind back again and again and again. So it's this sort of artificial two-facet endeavor, mindfulness and awareness. And Rinpoche says that what happens is the awareness becomes brighter and brighter and brighter and basically eliminates the mindfulness. There's no need for mindfulness if there's perfect awareness. He said in the beginning, it's like a stick of incense with that little glowing tip. Just this little bit of awareness. And with that tip, you put that tip on any obstacle that comes up. And what are the obstacles to mindfulness? Well, they're just two. One is being, loggy and slow and depressed. It's not the psychological depression, but, you're just kind of sleepy or just fuzzing out. And so you forget the object of meditation. The example would be if you're counting your breath, for instance, counting to 10, starting over again, counting to 10, and suddenly you find yourself, at 35 because you just didn't have the sharp awareness. And so then, the burning incense tip of your awareness touches on that slowness, and you go back to the object of meditation and start your counting over again. The other obstacle is too much excitation. So, you forget what you're counting at all because you're just often thinking about, the wonderful things you could do if you were a chef, or whatever. And the same thing, you take the awareness, catches that, and you burn it. And so this tip becomes brighter and brighter and brighter until this is the symbolism of flame in the Tantra, for instance. It's this wisdom that's not only illuminating, but it's burning up your obscurations. This is what's so powerful about it. So these are great helps because if you're just sitting, you can do an experiment with this. It's similar in Dzogchen where, you sit and just relax the mind, And what do? The mind just starts throwing up all this stuff and we're distracted again and again and again. The whole problem is just distraction. But additionally, this need for this confidence, because it's easy. It's easy to fool ourselves. And there are other factors that can happen too. There's a state, for instance, that the Tibetans describe as a river going underground. And you feel there's a certain kind of peace, there's a certain kind of easy concentration. But what's happening is the mind is not sharp. And they say it's flowing a river flowing under a big sea of grass. And you've lost actually the flow, but it seems like a profound state. So there's many, many, many pitfalls because of how we've trained our mind in the wrong way, so to speak. And again, this is why all of these teachings are so helpful, because there's nothing wrong with practicing on form. It's not like a graduate course or something, and if you're not resting in the mind without any objects, you feel like you can't do that. Well, these other things help you in that way. So it's all truly one piece. But nonetheless, to understand this higher view, of course, is extremely helpful. Okay. Now, without beginning or end, the mind, emptiness in essence, clarity by nature, and knowledge as aspect, exist since time without beginning. Since time without beginning also, it has been covered by illusion, functioned in an erroneous manner, and has been prisoner of samsara. It did not appear out of the blue, as if it never existed previously. If we recognize the authentic nature of the mind in the future and become a Buddha, it does not mean that the mind will cease to exist. Space is empty. As far as one can reach into the past, there is no moment marked as its beginning. As far as one can reach into the future, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, or whatever length of years, space will never cease to exist. Being empty, space is without beginning or end and is permanent. Our mind, empty as space, is also without beginning or end. So we get a sense of the vastness here. This is something that, takes faith too. Although truly people who are somehow find themselves, engaged in a sincere way with any of this, already have some level of understanding in this, or certainly confidence in it, in either some sort of moment or just a confidence. All of that's extremely rare and positive. So, without beginning or end, and now the four veils. Our empty, clear, and knowing mind is also called the potential of primordial awareness. This potential of primordial awareness is comparable to pure water. If we mix earth in this pure water, it becomes muddy. Similarly, because of fundamental ignorance, the potential of primordial awareness is reduced to a potential of individualized consciousness. This intervention of ignorance is the veil of innate ignorance. The mind does not recognize its own nature. I'm not quite sure, but I think this potential of this individualized consciousness is vipariyasa. Forgive me, I won't go there. Vijnana. Sorry, JNA is knowledge. It pops up in a lot of the mantras. You see it in the word prajna, samjna, many words pointing to the mind in one degree or another in Buddhist teachings, of course. And so jna is knowing. Jnana is like this, pure, fundamental, vast kind of knowing, like he just described. Well, you put a V on it though. So vijnana. V is divisive, is dividing. It's knowing by the extremes, so to speak, by the divisions. So this is our individual consciousness, which has in it, of course, this jnana, this vastness. But we've artificially divided everything up into you and me, black and white, all these distinctions. And yet to know these distinctions clearly and not be attached realizes the vastness. So vijnana and jnana, they merge, you might say. It's like this, the oneness of samsara and nirvana. But nonetheless, this intervention of ignorance is the veil of innate ignorance. The mind does not recognize its own nature, and that's where it starts. Consequently, the notion of me and other forms. It is the veil of duality, also called determined ignorance, or veil of latent conditioning. The mind, not recognizing its own nature as empty, asserts, instead of this emptiness, it asserts an I, the subject, with which it identifies itself. Not recognizing the manifestation of its own clarity, The mind conceives it as other or as object. Between the two extreme poles of this duality of I and other, conflicting emotions appear. First, attraction and repulsion, automatically followed by blindness, which does not recognize their own empty nature. From these three basic conflicting emotions, many ramifications develop, totaling 84,000, and constitute the veil of emotions. Under their influence, we accomplish varied and numerous negative acts, forming the veil of karma. So there you go. These veils, you can think of it as the emotions, the kleshas, these obscurations, these afflictive mind states, they create the karma. And of course, all of us are just living in karma. That's what's in the newspaper. The karma all the time. That's what people tell each other in their stories about themselves, what's going on in their life, with their kids, with whatever. It's all the karma, the outer level that we all see. And we start this process of looking within, and we see how the negative emotions actually produce that. I had a case today where, a trial, and it was just amazing to me how this poor mother, they've been separated for 6 years in joint custody and just been nonstop fighting. But she couldn't say anything without being this I that was being somehow, harmed. She just was literally incapable of seeing, any role that she might have had in it, or that the other person, struggling just doing the best that he could or whatever. It was an extreme case. But nonetheless, we carry this I around, and there was nothing. Sometimes you can ask someone, can you express that to me without an I? The Japanese, have many ways in their language, I'm told, that they don't even have an I in the sentence. And it kind of reflects this social kind of understanding they have, and this emphasis that their culture has on harmony. And there you go. Yeah, other languages can do that, I know, too. You know Tibetan more than me. It's good. I think about the movie, was it the Brad Pitt movie, 7 Years in Tibet, where, he's this Austrian sort of superstar athlete, mountain climber, finds himself in Tibet through the vagaries of World War II. He's on he wasn't even a member of the Nazi party because he was a superstar. He was Austrian, but he was climbing mountains. They were trying to climb K2 in the Himalayas. And they were up in this mountain, and they had their base camp, or base, not on the mountain, but were going from British India, northern India, climbing mountain. And when they came back down from their mountain expedition, World War II had broken out, but of course they didn't know it. So they walked into British India and got arrested as prisoners of war. Well, the prison camp where they were is now owned by the Drikung, that area. That's where Janchu Bling, the monastery, is. But nonetheless, I'm getting distracted here. Forgive me. We in the movie, Brad Pitt plays this Austrian superstar. And they break out of this prison camp, and their idea is to get to Japan, because Japan being allied with Germany, they could get back home. But they have to go across China, and Japan had invaded China, so they're going to somehow get to China. And they go across Tibet to get there. But they get stuck, and he spends 7 years in Tibet, and the Dalai Lama befriends him, and since he's an engineer, also puts him to work doing different things, useful things in Lhasa. But in the movie, it shows him starting to get sweet on a Tibetan girl. And he starts showing off in certain ways, in certain really kind of immature ways, but nonetheless. And she gives him a little lesson. And she said, in our culture, people who stand out like that are not admired. Rather, you're admired for your inner qualities, which people have to be able to see, so to speak. It is so different. It is so different. So there's the I. Now, the origin of the classes of existence. The conjunction of conflicting emotions and the resultant acts leads to the 6 types of rebirth in samsara. Motivated by hatred or anger, one engages in killing. The result is rebirth into one of the hells. Attachment creates possessiveness. The cause of existence is a hungry ghost. Blindness prevents discrimination between positive and negative acts and induces rebirth in the animal realm. If one has protected life, practiced giving, and accomplished many positive acts, but at the same time has felt desire and attachment, this blend of positive and negative activity leads to birth as a human being. When one has accomplished many virtuous acts mixed with jealousy, one is reborn into the realm of the demigods. Virtuous acts mixed with pride lead to the worlds of the gods. These are the sensual gods. Because we have previously accomplished many positive acts and had established a connection with the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, we have now obtained the precious human existence. Then, neither real nor unreal. An ordinary being, under the influence of dualistic consciousness, is similar to a person having absorbed too much alcohol. Drunkenness creates hallucinations that this person believes is real. Similarly, the dualistic functioning of the potential of consciousness produces many illusory manifestations, which are the 6 classes of beings. We cannot say that these 6 classes of beings really exist, since they are nothing other than projections of the mind. They are empty in essence. Neither can we say that they do not exist at all, because as long as we are in one of them, although it is only a production of the mind, we are sure of its reality. Born as human beings, we have the idea that both ourselves and our surroundings are real. It is the same for the remaining classes of beings. It is said that the 6 classes of beings are neither true nor false. They are comparable to the moon reflecting itself on the surface of the water. This moon is not completely unreal, since one can see it. It is not real either, since it is nowhere. The dream is another illustration of this play of unreality, and reality. As long as the dream lasts, we are persuaded of the reality of its people, landscapes, and all that appear in it. We experience different feelings, including fear, suffering, fright, and so on. But once we wake up, this has all disappeared and exists nowhere. Phenomena of the dream are neither existent nor non-existent. Sometimes, even from just reading like this, you can get a sense of the vastness of the mind and the power of the mind. I mean, again, mind is the king, and everything comes from the mind. So Buddhism is nothing other than the training of the mind. And because mind is the essence, this emptiness is essence of the nature of our mind. Again, we're actually doing something that's actually useful and not just sort of spinning our wheels. People can have the desire for all sorts of happiness, of course, but the tragedy is that they're not going about it the right way. And the most fundamental thing is that we're always looking out. We never look in. Our eye is not able to look in, but through training we do. It's not our natural habit, but in a sense it is. We're always living in our sort of inner reactions and that. But again, this potential of individual consciousness, which is this sort of mistaken concept, this mistaken feeling of something that's actually vaster. All right, so taking off. Being under the influence of ignorance and prisoner of the dualistic functioning of the potential of consciousness is what is called samsara. Again, so this potential of consciousness is individualized consciousness. So being under the influence of ignorance and prisoner of the dualistic functioning of the potential of consciousness is what is called samsara. the basis of the experiences of suffering and happiness. When ignorance is totally dissipated, the knowledge inherent in the mind, Buddhahood, appears. And of course, this is the miracle. That in a sense, we don't have to do anything. We just sort of have to get out of the way. You know, Rinpoche has said that when the afflictions are stilled, the nature of the mind is clear. If we are not familiar with the teachings of awakening, it is impossible to liberate ourselves from samsara. If we walk on foot, ride a bike, go by train, drive a car, take a boat, or ride a horse, it is impossible for us to leave the surface of the earth. The only way to do this is to take an airplane. We all have access to this airplane. It is our connection with the Dharma. We have the ability to fly and perhaps are already in an intermediate state between samsara and liberation. It is characteristic of our precious human existence. Those who are not on a path of awakening have to be content with the surface of the earth. They cannot take off. Possessing precious human existence and being connected to a teaching that leads to awakening, it is still necessary to practice this teaching. Lacking practice, we obtain nothing. Now, negative acts and veils. Two obstacles prevent us from obtaining awakening: our veils and our negative acts. Veils, that is to say, the veil of ignorance and the veil of latent conditioning, are comparable to clouds in the sky. They do not allow us to see reality. As for the negative acts, they are equivalent to painfully beating ourselves. By accomplishing negative acts, we sow the seed of our own suffering. Given that we have committed negative acts and harvested their results for an infinite number of existences, during this period we have beaten ourselves without ceasing. It is because of their painful consequences that one speaks of negative acts. It is impossible to reach awakening without suppressing these negative acts and veils. They condemn us to spin in samsara. If, on the other hand, we dissipate them, merit and wisdom increase by themselves. So let us take the example of night and day. When it is night, complete darkness creates a difficult situation. At daybreak, the sun does not yet appear, but a first gleam of light hits the earth. As the sun continues to rise, light increases. And by this single fact, darkness decreases. Similarly, when negative acts and veils diminish, merit and wisdom spontaneously grow. For negative acts and veils to disappear completely, and for merit and wisdom to fully bloom, it is necessary to realize Mahamudra, the ultimate nature of the mind. But that cannot be done without preparation. This is why we first accomplish preliminary practices, including prostrations, recitation of the mantra 100 syllables, mandala offering, and guru yoga. These preparatory phases allow us to accumulate merit and wisdom. This is so profound, really. It's like, especially, I think us, maybe our culture, I don't know other cultures who does really, the kind of conditioning that you have from your mother's milk and growing up, just seeing things, how different people see things. You don't really know another person, even in your own culture. But this tendency in America, we're in such a hurry and we don't want to do the work that's necessary, although we do lots of work. But it's like, we don't want to chew willow bark. We want to invent aspirin, take the active ingredient. We don't want to chew cocoa leaves. We want cocaine. We always go for the active ingredient. And there's kind of a danger, I think, for us, because we are well educated. If you take the educational level of human beings throughout all of human existence, going back, 400,000 years or something, we're extraordinarily educated. And so we can run across things like Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and of course we think, oh, I'll just go there and I can skip all of this, and or don't even know about it, don't have the interest in the good karma to even come across all of these relative teachings. And I joke because I think of, Khenpo Sherabodzer. He said to somebody once, he said, oh yeah, Dzogchen's very easy. He says, you just sit and you get your mouth open and you just stare up, and he demonstrated his arms wide apart, palms up, and just looking up at the sky, and you just look up at the sky. But what's really hard is bodhicitta. And of course he's right, because Dzogchen is not apart from bodhicitta. You can't practice Dzogchen if you can't practice bodhicitta. And anyone who jumps into bodhicitta finds out this is challenging. And this is something, in my own opinion, is one of the great benefits of the visualization practices, because it immediately just kind of humbles you. We can have, speaking for myself, tremendous amounts of arrogance, but it's just very hard when you're practicing visualization and you're not seeing the entire mandala. You're not seeing yourself as a Buddha. You're just all over the place. And then when you're having a discussion with something like Rinpoche, you can't fake it. This is really healthy. It gives us an appreciation of just how profound Buddhahood is, just how profound self-liberation is. And this is really good, because then you're like a student, like in the physics class. You're not in there thinking that you know more than the teacher knows, the professor or whatever, and that you just have calculus just in the back of your head. No, you approach it with an open mind, a not knowing mind. That's so important. And of course, it allows for, real progress to take place, because your ego's out of the way, or at least diminished. Now he goes to the 3-year retreat. Any virtuous act of body, speech, or mind reduces faults and veils and brings us closer to Buddhahood. And how wonderful is that? Because again, people can make all sorts of false kind of ladders in their mind. I got to get to here before I can get to there. It's all just thinking. And especially the teachings are so helpful in that regard. They have these kinds of, the graded path to enlightenment and all that. All that's good. But it doesn't necessarily happen like the book says. Those are just general guidelines to prevent us from wandering wildly off the path and to assist us and teachers in our training. But everybody's individual, and there really aren't any rules in one sense to this stuff. And so to know that all this repetition of mantra, for instance, it is not wasted. You can feel like totally distracted all the time, and like Lama Tarchin said, it's like he says I'm like a parrot. He says I'm just repeating stuff, not knowing what I'm saying. He says and when it comes to meditation in my cave, I was more like a bear, just kind of hibernating in there, spending time. But it's not true. It's not true, because you can't do mantra and be completely ignorant. You can't, because you're saying the word anyway. You're hearing the sound, and there's some degree of motivation there that we continually work on. But nonetheless, we are accumulating. We're training the mind. And if you're saying that one mantra, like it says here, any virtuous act of body, speech, or mind reduces faults and veils, brings us closer to Buddhahood. You're not piling on negative karma, even if it's not, a pure act. That's all right. However, because we are engaged in ordinary life, work, and are absorbed by many occupations, we do not have an opportunity to accomplish many positive acts. When one is committed to a 3-year and 3 months retreat, this means that during 3 years and 3 months, all ordinary activity is abandoned. The body, speech, and mind focus exclusively on the practice of the Dharma and virtuous and positive activity. Therefore, this retreat is a way to quickly dissipate the veils and faults and make merit and wisdom grow. Even by applying ourselves with much diligence to positive practice during the traditional retreat, it is not likely that we will attain full awakening, but at least we learn to practice Mahamudra, and this will gradually lead us to awakening. There's one story of, I've forgotten her name, maybe Gretchen, maybe you remember, it was a young woman in Japan who, this is right after World War II, And she was young. I think she was 18 or 19, and she had a heart condition or something like this. Was very fragile and was just staying at home. And there was a modern Buddhist master who knew the family and would go and give her teachings. And she had this remarkable process where she had a realization, and then over a period of 10 days, it just deepened significantly day by day by day. And at one point she said, she was telling the teacher, she came to see that this was a gradual process. And he very much praised her, saying it's very rare for people to see that these days, because there are degrees, and yet you have this kind of situation where someone can have, a valid realization, and yet the ego comes back so great. And this is one of the great advantages, again, of having this incredible body of teachings, lineage, describing the path in this gradual way, because it allows you to have confidence and to see that you need to go further, but not in some sort of obsessive way, but just understanding that the vastness of the mind, we can get a glimpse. It said that we're like frogs at the bottom of a well. We're seeing this little blue dot, which is our experience of the sky. But to climb out of the well, and you're not used to it, but you see a little bit more, that's good. It's like more and more and more. But to realize that the more and more and more is necessary until full Buddhahood, gradually lead us to awakening. Flattening the heap down, he says, the fact that we do not reach Buddhahood quickly is not because Dharma is not effective, but it is because we have accumulated negative acts and strengthened our veils since time without beginning. Eliminating negative acts and veils demands some work. Suppose that the awakening we want to reach is like a heap of soil in the middle of a plain that we want to flatten. A single person attacking the flanks of the heap with a pickaxe and spade would certainly start the work, but it is unlikely that the heap will be flattened in 3 years. Those who engage in ordinary activity and have little time for spiritual practice are in the situation of the person who has only a pickaxe and a spade. Doing a 3-year retreat is comparable to attacking the solid heap with a mechanical shovel or a bulldozer. The retreat offers us the possibility of applying great force to practice, and consequently we can clear away a great quantity of faults and veils. Now, instantaneous light. For those who really know how to meditate, according to the Mahamudra, there is nothing easier than eliminating faults and veils. Let us suppose that this room is without an opening, in total darkness, and that we want to illuminate it. One method would be using some tools, cutting out openings, and making windows and doors. This would be a great work comparable to the implementation of the virtuous activity of body, speech, and mind. Practicing Mahamudra is a different and direct approach, like switching on a light. So that's the instantaneous nature of it. Too close, too profound, too easy, and too good. Although Mahamudra is extraordinarily easy, what prevents us from practicing and immediately understanding it? It is said that the true nature of our mind, Mahamudra, is too near for us to see and understand it, like the face being too close to the eye for the eye to see it. It is also said that if we are on the surface of a very deep ocean, we can look and look again, we will see neither fish in the depths nor the boulders on the ocean's floor. Mahamudra also is so profound that we cannot probe it. Mahamudra is very easy. We do not need to go elsewhere. There is nothing to do, nothing to recite, no object of meditation per se. The mind discovers its own nature in Mahamudra. It is said that it is too easy for us to believe. Practicing Mahamudra develops many infinitely great qualities implied in the realization of the 3 bodies of awakening. It is said that these qualities are so great and so good that our mental capacities cannot encompass them. Understand, too, that these levels of understanding that he's talking about here, this is reflected in the Bodhisattva path. And the important thing to understand is that this is a path of joy. So you can hear stories like this about, the difficulty of complete awakening, and people can take some discouragement in that sometimes. They're saying, gee, I can't do a 3-year retreat, and he's just saying even a 3-year retreat isn't enough, so what's in it for me? But of course, we don't know our karma. We don't know our karma. And again, this is sometimes an example of these false kind of mental ladders that we make, thinking that I have to do something like this to this, to this, to this, to this. And of course, these are distractions. These are ways that we keep ourselves from actually engaging in the practice because we don't know. There are examples of profound realizations of people who didn't seem to practice even. Because we carry things from previous lifetimes. But regardless, one great Japanese master said, you shouldn't worry about this. If you're doing the practice, he said, look, something that's hard to accomplish in one day is easily accomplished the next day. You go to sleep, you get up, and you finish it off. It really wasn't much to it, the big project you were working on. And so too it is with the realization. Any work that we do is not wasted. Buddha in front of the television. It is unlikely that all of you will do the traditional retreat, but if you have faith and trust and energetically apply yourselves to purification and accumulation, as well as to the Mahamudra meditation, you will understand what Mahamudra is. When one truly knows how to practice it, the meditation of Mahamudra is extraordinarily simple. In Tibet and India, it was said that one could easily reach Buddhahood while spinning wool, governing a kingdom, or even while being devoted to work in the fields. We have records of many practitioners who have reached liberation by continuing their ordinary activity. Some were farmers, potters, others dressmakers, and so on. If, during the 3-year retreat, you can develop good experience of Mahamudra, you will be able, following the retreat, if you want to become a businessman working with millions of dollars every hour of the day. Or if you prefer, you will be able to do nothing at all but sit like Milarepa, eating nettles, and attain Buddhahood in this way. Mahamudra does not imply meditating on deities or reciting mantras. The mind dwells in itself without distraction, without creating or making anything, in recognition of his essence. If you know how to meditate like this, perhaps we will be able to add another possible circumstance for reaching Buddhahood. Becoming Buddhahood while watching television? When one practices Mahamudra, there is no need to reject conflicting emotions. They appear and disappear by themselves naturally. Mahamudra is so powerful that it is said it tears samsara to pieces. Also, it makes me think here, Rinpoche gave teachings here once on the Ganges Mahamudra. These are instructions that Tilopa gave to Naropa on the banks of the Ganges River. It's a beautiful little text. If you read it, like this text is doing here, like Kalu Rinpoche is doing, you get a sense of Mahamudra practice for sure. Now, we will meditate a moment. We place our mind in such a state that we do nothing. We create nothing and are also not distracted by anything else. From time to time, you can use the exercise of placing your mind in this manner yourself. Gradually, you will come to understand it by yourselves. What is important above all is to have faith in the Lama, pray to him or her, and develop love and compassion towards ordinary beings. By this faith, love, and compassion, you will dissipate a great number of faults and veils, drawing closer to Mahamudra. As long as we have not realized Mahamudra, we must avoid all negative acts and practice all positive acts. Indeed, as we continue to function in the framework of the potential of individualized consciousness, we remain subject to karma. Those who have acquired the ability to effectively practice Mahamudra are outside the framework of conventions, as seen in the examples of great masters of ancient India. Saraha obtained realization by sleeping for 12 years. Virupa, by being drunk day and night. And King Indrabodhi, enjoying the company of 500 queens during the day and 500 queens at night, attained realization in 12 years. Usually we don't tell Americans about these kinds of things. Right, exactly. Right. Not the drunk one. How about all three at once? Sleeping, drunk, and King and Booty. In the future, perhaps we will be able to follow these examples. For now, we must aspire to reach realization. This is why we recite in the dedication, by this virtue may I quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish all beings in this state. All right, next time is Mahamudra 3. Well, this is unfair going through this fast like this, but it's good too. Yeah, sort of. I think so. But again, training of the mind. We're training the mind even when we don't know it. All right. So, any questions? This is a good place to stop. We actually got through all of Mahamudra 2.
Frank.
Yes. Yeah.
What Tantra is?
Yeah, Tantra. Some classifications of include Mahamudra in Tantra, but many don't. So you have Tantra is this body of practice where we practice the results of Buddhahood. Normally, in conventional Buddhism, either self-liberation or the conventional Mahayana, the practice of the 6 perfections, for instance, in the conventional Mahayana, we're always practicing good causes with the confidence and faith and intellectual view that these good causes, through the power of cause and effect, will result in Bodhi, in awakening. So we're practicing the causal path of Buddhahood. This is what the Dalai Lama teaches publicly, and very much what Khenpo teaches too, because you have beings who maybe have no interest in Buddhism at all, but you don't want to make a obstacle for them. And so you're teaching from this normally dualistic view, but we're going to practice good causes, and that's going to result in awakening or happiness or self-liberation or something like that. But the Tantra takes a different view, where since Buddha said we are Buddhas, we actually are Buddhas right now, but we just don't know it. It's covered over. That we can then profitably and correctly, instead of practicing the causal path, practice the resultant path. So we practice as Buddhas right now. We imagine ourselves as Buddhas. And in Mahamudra, you go right to Buddha in the nature of the mind. We're just going to relax into that mind. This obviously takes faith. That's why there's such emphasis on faith and Guru Yoga. Because without the faith, for instance, that the mind of the deity is this great, vast loving kindness and compassion that we've been talking about in the conventional Mahayana all the time, there's a danger that people, because it can evoke, one, we're using our negative emotions, the energy of our negative emotions. It's easy to get sort of distracted into those negative emotions. And additionally, it does create, especially when you're working with the subtle body, it does create blissful states. And people can get distracted by, instead of using bliss as this great wave of positive energy, taking you to Buddhahood further, to further insight, can just sort of want to hang out there or think that that's the purpose of it. So it's a profound path, traditionally protected. Tantra means, mantra, for instance, means the protection of the mind. Tantra means the protection of the protection rather of the body. So we're using the body, but in a profound way. Not as this thing in the traditional training. We'll have a touch of that this weekend, where we see the imperfections of the body. to sort of stop the ordinary, just extreme attachment we have to the body. The preliminary meditations will look at the actual nature of the body, and then it doesn't look so good. We realize it's sort of like falling in love. You're kind of on an illusion, and it's just kind of a funny situation. It's just kind of a craziness. And so the practice is looking coldly at how the body actually exists, the phlegm, the impermanence of it, the kind of awkwardness, all these things. And it has a way of lessening this kind of ignorant attachment. So, but now in the Tantra, we're using the body in this highly realized state. The mind, it is visualized Buddha and feeling ourselves to be a Buddha, but again, with all of these protections of samaya, of commitments, of empowerment, of obligations to teacher, to fellow students. So Tantra, yes, means the protection of the body and these special practices where we are practicing the end result. Now, with the visualized Tantra, we're like a step. We're a big step closer to Buddhahood, but we're still a step away from the profound, complete understanding of Mahamudra. So again, we practice the creation stage, and then we dissolve this created Buddha, but it's more than created. It's actually us. You can realize these things apart from you consciously creating them. But then we dissolve, and we dissolve into the nature of the mind, very close to Mahamudra. The image that's used is at the creation stage, the effort that we put into visualizing the mandala and ourselves and all the deities and the colors and all the symbols, that this is like pulling back on a bow. And the completion stage, where we dissolve all that, is like letting the bow go. And the arrow flies, they say, to Buddhahood, flies to Mahamudra. So in Mahamudra, we're going directly there right away. And this is why it's said that in Dzogchen and Mahamudra, they're like sort of one with Guru Yoga. There's said to be only two ways of going to Buddhahood. They say three, but that's because one is purification, two is accumulation of merit and wisdom, but that's really one process going on actually. But the final way is Guru Yoga. And this is something that exists only in Tantric Buddhism. People can have great devotion to their teacher, say, in the sutra, but you think the teacher is someone who's a little bit farther along the path than you. But in the Vajrayana, Tantrayana, Mahamudra, Dzogchen, we train ourselves to consider the Lama as being a full Buddha right now. Of course, that's very powerful, but very intense too. Because when you see something you don't like, you got to realize it's your mind seeing that. So this is something that can be really challenging. Dzogchen Khyentse tells a story of that he was at an empowerment, and the Karmapa was chewing tobacco and spitting into a little cup that he had. And so Dzogchen Khyentse told this story to some Tibetans, or maybe they're Bhutanese, I can't remember. And of course, this was very shocking because they kept this Bhutanese tried to say, no, you must have seen it wrong. The Karmapa can't do anything like that. That's just like, no, that's lower activity, blah, 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 blah. And finally, he sort of accepted it, but it was kind of it was a problem for him. He didn't have pure vision. And then Dzogchen Khyentse told that story to his guru. I've forgotten his name, forgive my own mind. But nonetheless, told it to his guru, and his guru's response was, "You think you could get me some of that spit?" So we don't tell that to people who come in the door of White Lotus for the first time. But you get an image of pure vision. What if you had that kind of purity of vision? It's like everything is workable to you. Instead of this critical mind we walk around. Now, we have to use a discriminating mind, don't get me wrong. It's not stupidity. But you can develop this incredible mind of loving kindness and compassion where, you love the mosquitoes It's hard to believe. But you see it in your own practice. We start out so in our lane, so to speak, on our team, whatever it is, whether it's ethnic, racial, national, species, whatever it is, we're there, or just families, and you regard others outside of that. But then slowly, you start appreciating the difficult kid in somebody else's family. You can love that person in a sincere way and not a manufactured way. So, but that's the Tantra. It said that it's the most effective practice for our era, according to the Tibetans, because it uses the negative emotions, and there's so much power in the negative emotions. It even uses the negative emotions, the energy of hatred, which is so immediate, so electric, and so destructive. But therefore, that's turned around. It becomes very, very powerful in dissolving the obscurations. So, anyway.
Another question.
Yeah.
In the film about Garchen Rinpoche, and previously I noticed as well, he talked about the fact that his father was one of his teachers in the monastery.
Yes.
And that his was very rough and tough with him.
Yes.
And I have a hard time understanding that his father would have been, and he respects him, of course, but that his father would clout him on the head so badly that he got like spinal damage. I mean,
yeah, it depends on the child too. Again, this isn't something you put in a psychology book, and we want everybody acting this way. But it said that the tulkus, the reincarnated lamas, if they're legit, someone asked the Dalai Lama once, "Now, this business of these reincarnated people, is this legit? Are these people legit?" The Dalai Lama stopped for a while, and he said, 50-50. So, but that's not bad odds. I'm thinking if there's a one, that's good enough for me. In the Orthodox Church, they say there are 12 beings that are holding the world together, that their great love and compassion is such that the world isn't flying apart right now. We don't know who they are. They aren't necessarily members even in the church, but they're people like this. Somehow I find that easier to believe than a lot of our slogans and theories. But forgive me. What was the question again? Where are we? Oh, Garchen Rinpoche's father. Yeah. Lama Tarchin had similar stories like that his father was his greatest teacher, because it said that a lot of these tulkus are, very strong personalities. The story of in Chogyam Trungpa's own autobiography, he was talking about just how out of control he was. But suddenly, like at age 13, suddenly it just clicked for him, and he just couldn't get enough of the Dharma, going deeper and deeper and wanting to understand. And so for Gar Rinpoche, there are cultural differences in there too, which I think appear differently for us these days. I mean, for instance, even, someone of my age, I was raised in a suburban high school, public high school in Minneapolis. And who was the senator from Minnesota? Al Franken. He was on Saturday Night Live, then became a senator. He was from my high school. The columnist in the New York Times, Thomas Friedman, was from my high school. But my point is that it was a very suburban, mainstream type of place. And yet we got paddled, and it wasn't as negative as it sounds. It was kind of like a mark of pride that the teachers were concerned about you, and they were kind of initiating you in a funny way into the, the body of the tough kids or whatever. I don't know how to say it, but I just mean that these days, if you paddle someone in high school, you end up going to jail or something. So there's cultural differences, but even in our own culture, and certainly in Tibet, there are big cultural differences. But apart from that, there is this business of training the tulkus and how important it is. One of our daughters was a figure skater, and the stories we would hear about the training that Olympic figure skaters get. I mean, these girls, they don't even go to their high school. They move away so they can be near a teacher in southern LA, and they're out there, skating just day in, day in, day in, day. I mean, we put people through a lot of kind of torture for things that we value as a culture. But yeah, his dad being tough on him. But he said that my father was my greatest teacher. I don't know if that answers it, Roberta.
Yeah, it helps. It helps. It's just that it's hard. I mean, I understand sort of being strict, or I can even understand that corporal punishment is acceptable
Uh-huh.
within a realm, right? To a
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
But depending on the culture, I just thought, well, it just seemed he's so sweet and good, right?
Right. Right. I think of it sometimes like one, and it's so interesting, his interactions. When I become aware in different ways at different times of something really stupid that I've done, or really obscure kind of blockage kind of thing, and I realize he's seen that all the time. So we had, we did here one Yamantaka retreat here in rural Rochester. And again, we have the windows are closed and it's 24/7 all the time. And we did it without lamas here. It was very wonderful. And one of the participants is a woman from Taiwan, and she's a real kind of character. She's very close to Gar Rinpoche in her heart. And right after the retreat, because we were doing this again, independently with Gar Rinpoche's blessings, but she called Gar Rinpoche right after, and she said, "Rinpoche, the retreat just ended." And he said, "Well, how did it go?" And she said, "Well, yeah, it went very well." And he said, "You slept too much." So he knows, he knows, but. But he's never said something like that to me. But to somebody else, he could, if it would be helpful. I don't believe it's a kind of thing like that. I think it's not like it's a kind of training that we have to beat up the kids so that they'll end up a certain way. No, I think it's completely different. There's cultural things in there for sure that other people could maybe accept. I think with the Tibetans, that wouldn't raise questions as it does for us. What you doing hitting your son on the head like that. But nonetheless, it is individual. It's not like routine or mechanical. It's coming completely, I believe, from the heart of great compassion and what's appropriate. If you look at the examples of Milarepa and Naropa and all of that, my goodness, if anybody did that, they'd be in jail. Those teachers, they can't do like that. But nonetheless, still. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, let's do the dedication. And I think we'll do the one that he just gave us. By the virtue of us reciting tonight, thinking tonight, reading together, talking, may I quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish all beings in this state. Swaha. Okay, thank you, everybody. More next week. Right. We got a weekend retreat going on a text, Calm and Clear. It's going to be basically meditation, but it's this great text by Mipam. So it's Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and is it in the evening then too, and then Sunday morning. And so we do this sometimes, and it's kind of a wonderful surprise for people who don't know and walk in off the street. They get a chance to participate if they want to. Yeah. It's not even a contribution of the retreat. It's all, yeah. Right. But yeah, any part of it, it's fine. Just come on in. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.